I grew up believing my parents had already decided who would succeed in life. My older brother Daniel was the favorite. He was the smart one, the responsible one, the one teachers praised and neighbors admired. Every family gathering turned into another speech about Daniel's achievements. Daniel got the highest score in his class. Daniel helped his father fix the car. Daniel will become a great man someday. And then there was me, Lucas, the other son, the one people barely noticed. Whenever relatives asked about me, my mother would smile politely and say, "Lucas is doing his best." That sentence haunted me my entire childhood. Doing his best. It felt like a polite way of saying I would never be as good as my brother. Daniel never mocked me directly, but he didn't help either. He simply lived his perfect life while I stood in his shadow. At school, teachers compared us constantly. "Why can't you study like your brother?" "Daniel was top of this class 3 years ago. Your brother never caused trouble." Every comparison slowly built a wall inside my heart. I didn't hate Daniel at first, but jealousy is quiet. It grows slowly, like rust. By the time I was 16, I couldn't stand hearing his name anymore. One evening during dinner, my father placed a letter on the table. Daniel had been accepted into one of the best universities in the country. My parents were glowing with pride. My mother even cried. "We always knew you would do something great," she told him. Then my father turned to me. "Lucas, you should learn from your brother." Something inside me snapped that night. I pushed my chair back and walked out of the house without saying a word. That was the moment I stopped trying to be better. If the world had already decided Daniel was the successful one, then I would simply become the opposite. I stopped studying. I skipped classes. I began hanging around people who didn't care about school or the future. For the first time in my life, nobody compared me to Daniel. It felt freeing. But freedom without direction quickly becomes destruction. By the time Daniel left for university, I had almost completely lost control of my life. My grades collapsed, my teachers stopped expecting anything from me, and my parents stopped trying to push me. The house grew quiet. Daniel was away building his future. I was slowly ruining mine. One night my father came into my room. He sat on the chair near my bed and sighed. "Lucas," he said softly, "this is not who you are." I didn't even look up from my phone. "It's who everyone thinks I am," I replied. He sat there silently for a while. Then he left. That was the last serious conversation we had for years. Eventually, I dropped out of school. I told myself education didn't matter. I told myself successful people were just lucky. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had given up. Meanwhile, Daniel's life kept rising. He graduated with honors. He got a high-paying job in another city. Our parents talked about him constantly. Every phone call ended with the same sentence. "Daniel is doing very well." I stopped visiting home. I stopped answering most calls. And for a long time, I convinced myself I didn't care. Years passed like that. I worked random jobs. Construction, delivery, warehouse shifts. Nothing stable, nothing meaningful. But life has a strange way of forcing you to confront the truth you avoid. One winter evening, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was shaking. "Lucas, your father collapsed." Everything inside me froze. I rushed to the hospital. When I arrived, Daniel was already there. It had been almost 5 years since I had seen him. He looked different, more confident, more mature. But when he saw me, he didn't look angry. He simply hugged me, just like that. No judgment, no lecture, just a quiet hug. I didn't know why that moment hurt more than any criticism ever had. Our father survived the incident, but the doctors warned us his health was fragile. That night, Daniel and I sat in the hospital corridor for hours. We barely spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. "You disappeared for a long time," he said gently. I shrugged. "Everyone already had their successful son. You didn't need another one." Daniel looked at me with confusion. "What are you talking about?" I laughed bitterly. "You were always the favorite, the perfect one." For a moment, he didn't respond. Then he shook his head slowly. "Lucas, you have no idea how wrong you are." That caught me off guard. He leaned back in the chair and sighed. "You think being the perfect one felt good?" he asked. I frowned. "Of course it did." He gave a tired smile. "It didn't." He stared at the hospital floor as he spoke. "Every time you got in trouble, Dad looked at me like it was my responsibility to fix you." I blinked in surprise. "Every time you failed a class, they pushed me harder to succeed." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't the favorite, he continued quietly. I was the investment. That sentence stayed in my mind for a long time. The investment. For the first time, I realized something shocking. We had both been suffering in different ways. I felt invisible. Daniel felt pressured. Two brothers trapped by the same expectations. But by then, our lives had already taken very different paths. After our father left the hospital, Daniel returned to his city. I went back to my unstable life, but something had changed. For the first time in years, I started asking myself a painful question. What if my failure wasn't my parents' fault? What if it was mine? Regret is a heavy emotion. It doesn't arrive loudly. It creeps in quietly during long nights. Every missed opportunity began replaying in my mind. Every teacher who tried to help me. Every moment I chose anger instead of effort. And one night, sitting alone in my small apartment, I realized something terrifying. Daniel hadn't stolen my future. I had thrown it away. That realization hit harder than anything else. For the first time in my life, I wanted to change. But change at 30 years old feels very different than change at 16. It feels slower, harder, more humiliating. I enrolled in night classes to finish my education. During the day, I worked in a warehouse. At night, I studied with teenagers who were almost 10 years younger than me. Sometimes they laughed when they realized I was older. But I ignored it. Because for the first time in years, I was moving forward instead of backward. Progress was slow, very slow. But every small success felt like climbing out of a deep hole. Months later, I passed my exams. When the results came out, I stared at the paper for almost 10 minutes. I had done it. It wasn't a perfect score. It wasn't a university scholarship, but it was something I had believed was impossible. That evening, I called Daniel. For a moment, I almost hung up before he answered. But then I heard his voice. "Hey, Lucas." I took a deep breath. "I passed," I said. There was silence for a second. Then I heard something unexpected. My brother was laughing. Not mocking laughter. Happy laughter. "I knew you would," he said. And in that moment, I realized something important. The rivalry I had carried for half my life had only existed in my mind. Daniel had never been my enemy. He had always been my brother. Today, our lives are still very different. Daniel runs a successful company. I manage a logistics team in a warehouse. But for the first time, when people mention his success, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel something better. Pride. Because the truth is, success isn't about beating someone else. It's about refusing to give up on yourself. And sometimes the hardest part of growing up is realizing the person you were competing with was never your brother. It was the version of yourself that chose to quit.